Chapter 4. The Coven. Mission Diverted.
Let's say a new dean steps out of bounds, started Hester, and becomes a menace to her own school, added Annadel, and throws parties in honour of herself and forces everyone to take baths and makes kids eat boiled asparagus and wheatgrass, said Dot. What would you do if you were schoolmaster? Hester finished. The three witches each held a notebook open, feathered pen at the ready. Seated in his rickety hut at the top of a very tall pea tree, the Grand Vizier of Kingdom Kyrgios scratched his long, curly black beard, speckled with gold flakes, like the strands of his flowing black hair. I'm assuming this new dean is young and blonde, said Dot. I see, mulled the Vizier in a deep baritone. I would encourage this dean to think closely about what is going on in her personal life that is affecting her professional one. Sometimes a dean thinks a life of service is enough to bring fulfillment, and when it isn't, they begin to push boundaries as a cry for help. A schoolmaster can look that dean in the eye and ask, "What is it you really need?" Sometimes it's as simple as a vacation to the salt baths in Shazabah, but sometimes it's more than that. Much more, and it takes someone wise, deeply wise, to draw that out. Hester saw Annadel's eyes flick to her before finding the Vizier's once more. But why would a dean of evil listen to you if you were schoolmaster? The albino girl asked. You're from an Ever Kingdom, and no offense, even if you pledge to be impartial, most nevers think evers are half-brained, milk-livered air traps. 3 black rats poked out of her pocket and hissed agreement. Well, having 2 schoolmasters, one good and one evil, didn't work out, did it? The Vizier answered, glancing at the wooden clock on his mantel. I suggest this time you focus on quality over quantity. Also, as I'd hope you'd have learned in your history classes, Kingdom Kyrgios was once a Never Kingdom, which means, given my long lifespan, I've served both Ever and Never Kings with equal success. Dot scribbled a few notes, her stomach burbling loudly. Speaking of lifespans,
From our research, it seems you've been able to stay alive this long by using a variety of life-extending magic. Excuse my bluntness, but we don't want a schoolmaster who will drop dead his second week on the job. How much longer do you expect to live? As a crisps stale? None of you have touched them, the vizier said. Hester followed his eyes to the green-coloured chips stacked on a plate. Like everything else in Kyrgios, they smelled of peas, since peas were the life-blood of the kingdom. The Kyrgians even slept inside the pea pods that hung off trees like the one they were in now. Luckily, the witches weren't staying the night, since they had another interview scheduled in Pasha Dunes the next morning. Not hungry. Had a big breakfast, Hester snipped, though Dot's stomach was rumbling like a kettle drum now. Now, if you don't mind answering Dot's question. I'm confused. When is Dean Dovey joining us? The vizier asked, frowning. I need to get back to work. We've had strange attacks of late. A rogue carriage deliberately running over people, along with reports of pirates lurking near the forepoint, which is sacred land. I made the time to come here, assuming your dean would be present. And we thank you for making that time. But as we informed you in our letter, Dean Dovey entrusted us with the task of researching, locating and interviewing possible schoolmaster candidates as our fourth-year quest. Hester spouted, as if she'd had to say this many times before. Though we check in with Dean Dovey regularly, she will only be meeting with our final nominees. The vizier smiled blandly. So, Dovey remains in her glass towers, fussing over lunch menus and school dances, while she leaves the crucial work of choosing a schoolmaster, protecting the Storian, and defending the balance of our world to children. Children who've spent the last 6 months meeting with some of the most illustrious heroes and villains in the woods, said Annadel. Children who have sought out candidates in floating mountains, cloud forests, piranha lakes, active volcanoes, ice castles, mermaid lagoons, elephant graveyards, and the belly of a very large whale, said Dot. Children who will do whatever it takes to find the right person for the job, because this is our fairy tale quest, said Hester, demon tattoo twitching on her neck. Wouldn't you rather be fighting a giant or elf prince so you can get your name in a storybook? The vizier said, becoming serious. This all feels like a leader sending their henchmen to get the job done, and that never turns out well. Unless the leader knows we are the only people who can get the job done, said Hester. Because this is a quest that will shape good and evil for a long time to come, and our Coven cares more about that than having our names in a storybook, which is precisely why Professor Dovey picked us in the first place. And if she, the dean of our enemy school, is willing to put the fate of the woods in our hands rather than her own or anyone else's, then I suggest you stop worrying about our ages and start worrying about how to best respect the students you so wisely expect to lead.
The vizier gaped at her. "That's all," chimed Dot, turning a pea crisp to chocolate and flouncing with her friends out of his hut. A moment later, Dot shuffled back in. "Can you help us get down from this tree?" Dovey checked in with them each day at 1 o'clock, so the witches found a place to settle for lunch in Eternal Springs, a small jungle kingdom 15 miles from Kyrgios. Eternal Springs was populated entirely by animals, since it rained nearly every day of the year, and despite the abundance of greenery and food, no human or sentient creature wanted to live in a place that wet. As the witches waded through lush thickets and colourful flowers in their dumpy black dresses and boots, Hester could see deer, storks and squirrels watching them, as if they were an eclipse of the sun. They'd been on foot most of these past 6 months, since the flower ground had restored only limited service after being ravaged during the previous schoolmaster's reign. Along the way, they'd seen wonderful, curious things. The kingdom of Kassetkina ruled entirely by cats. The night pools in Netherwood, which brought your worst fears to life. The living library in Pifflepaff Hills, which had ancestry scrolls on every soul in the woods, kept by a very large bat. And the caves of Contempo in Borna Korek, where time ran backwards. They'd even taken a ride aboard the legendary blue-boned Stymph, from which they'd had a rare view of the 4 Point, a small square plot of land at the intersection of 4 kingdoms. It was the site of King Arthur's last battle, where he'd been mortally wounded, and was now considered a truce mark between good and evil, explained Hester, who'd read about it in A Student's History of the Woods. Camelot's flag flew high over the land, whose boundaries were guarded by 4 walls made of rushing waterfalls, enchanted by the Lady of the Lake. If anyone got close enough that even a drop of water touched their skin, the lady would reach out and drown them. The girls had made sure to stay at a safe distance as they flew on to their next interview in Hamelin. But that was back when they'd first started, when the search for a schoolmaster was marvellous fun, no matter how tiring or dangerous. Endless travel in the summer heat had taken its toll. Dot had blisters and an aching lower back. Hester's demon had a perpetual frown, and even Annadil's albino white skin had the hint of a tan. At least they were safe here in Eternal Springs, if a little damp, and after 6 months of crossing in and out of new kingdoms, all in pursuit of the best possible candidates they could take back to their dean, well, safety was about as much as they could ask for. Finding a spot under a well-canopied palm, Hester whipped up a lunch of avocados and custard apples that she'd snapped off trees, while Annadil cracked open a few coconuts filled with sweet water, and Dot spread out sheets of crumpled old newspaper she'd dug out of her bag, so they wouldn't have to sit in wet dirt. For 10 minutes they ate silently as rain spritzed around them, the 3 witches lost in their own heads, before they came out of their fugue all at once, like best friends often do.
I thought this last one was the most promising so far,
Annadil said, watching her rats wrestle over a dead caterpillar. Pea-man, Dot snarled, mouth full.
Calm, reasonable. I can see him in the schoolmaster's tower,
Annadil continued, slurping coconut water.
Even more than the ice giant from Frost Plains, the fairy rights activist from Gillikin, or that monkey king from Runyon Mills. None of them have been right,
muttered Hester.
We can do better. At some point we have to pick someone, Hester. It's been 6 months,
said Annadil.
Without a schoolmaster, the Storian is vulnerable. So are the woods.
I liked the augur of Ladleflop, said Dot. He told me I was pretty.
He was blind,
snapped Annadil. Oh, Pea-man was better then, said Dot.
We have to pick someone by the wedding,
Annadil resolved, giving Hester a wary look.
We're not missing the wedding, right?
Hester paused, picking at her food before looking up.
No, we're not missing the wedding.
Annadil sighed softly. No letters from Agatha in months, though, Dot said, sliding off her boots. Not since the one where she pretended like everything at Camelot was peaches and roses. Hope the wedding's still on.
Dovey would have told us if it wasn't,
said Annadil. I knew we should have been at the coronation. Maybe we could have stopped everything from going belly up, said Dot.
Finding a new schoolmaster was more important than watching Tedros make an ass of himself. Again, said Hester, pulling back her red and black hair. I'm sure he'll give a repeat performance in 2 months.
The wedding's that soon, Dot said.
Here comes the wedding diet. Let me guess, everything you touch will turn to kimchi,
Annadil cracked. No, ma'am. No more diets. I've been fat, I've been thin.
Fat is better, no matter what Daddy says.
Dot piped, digging into her chocolate avocado pudding. I just mean time is going fast and we haven't found a schoolmaster yet. They suddenly noticed Hester had gone quiet, squinting at her food. "Hester?" Dot prodded. Hester lifted her half-eaten avocado and studied the newspaper beneath the dish.
"How old is this paper?"
Got it in Gillikin. So, like 3 weeks ago?" said Dot. Hester leaned in, inspecting the headlines on the crusty parchment. "Pirates take over ports in Jaunt-Jolie. Numbers growing. Kidnapping foiled in Rainbow Gale. Fire at Glass Mountain Orchard." Her stomach twisted. Every single headline involved one of their classmates' quests. Beatrix was leading the charge against vicious pirates in Jaunt-Jolie. Vex and Mona were supposed to kidnap the seer of Rainbow Gale, who'd been helping Evers cheat their happy endings. Kiko was with the group tending the consecrated orchard atop Glass Mountain. And from the headlines, it didn't sound like any of it was going well.
"What's wrong?"
Annadille asked, her rats peeking up from their meal. Hester put her own food down, obscuring the parchment. No use worrying her friends over old news. Besides, was it her fault if her classmates were incompetent twits and failing their missions? Right now, she had her own quest to worry about. She turned to her friends.
"Are you sure we're asking the right questions?"
"You mean, should we be asking candidates if they like candlelit dinners and walks on the beach?" said Annadille. "After 6 months, 80 interviews, and I don't know how many nights listening to Dot fart in her sleep. Now you're wondering if we're asking the right questions?"
"It was those lentil cakes in Drupathy," Dot lamented.
"I just keep thinking about what Lady Lesso would do if she was here," Hester said, "because it feels like everyone we meet is saying exactly what we want to hear. Like, how do we know Mr. Calm and Reasonable won't turn into psychotic Rafal the moment he gets near the Storian?"
Dot and Annadille had no defence.
"Look, I know some are definitely better than others," said Hester. "But this is the future schoolmaster we're talking about. The protector of the pen that rules all our lives. And we can't make a mistake."
"But we also can't read their minds," pushed Annadille, "and the longer we wait, the more chance there is that someone swoops in and tries to fill the schoolmaster's place on his own. Someone as bad as Rafal. Or worse." And then who are the woods going to turn to for help? The King of Camelot like they used to? Tedros? You think he can lead? You think he can unite good and evil? He couldn't even get through his own coronation.
Hester watched her avocado turn black.
Besides, it's not like we're making the final decision. We just have to give Dovey a shortlist. The final decision is up to her.
Anadil persisted.
It's up to both deans, Hester shot back. Do you really want Sophie picking the next schoolmaster after she fell in love with the last one?
He'd be pretty at least, Dot mused. Sophie does have good taste in men. Hester gave her a putrid look. What? It's true, Dot said. She's probably sneaking gorgeous Everboys into evil as we speak.
Maybe the old Sophie would have,
Anadil countered.
But she's Dean now. She's the face of evil.
Annie's right. She has changed, Hester admitted. I mean, we hated her as Dean those last months of school, but she really did seem happy without a boy.
For now, said Dot.
For now,
Anadil conceded. And from what Dovey's told us, she's getting worse, said Dot. Moving into the schoolmaster's tower, adding beach cabanas to Halfway Bay, turning the Doom Room into a dance club on Saturday nights, morphing the castle into a living memorial to herself. Sounds like she's starting to push boundaries, just like P-Man said. I mean, how long before she decides she needs a date to Agatha's wedding? Hester and Anadil goggled at her. Hello? You don't think Sophie would show up alone, do you? To her best friend's wedding? To a king? Dot asked. Hester looked at Anadil.
Every once in a while she says something worth thinking about.
Not enough to keep her around,
said Anadil. Next time I'm eating all the lentil cakes, Dot huffed. Suddenly, a tiny spray of white light appeared above them, as if the air had ripped open, giving them a peek into a new dimension. The light distended and wobbled like a sack of water before it slowly took the shape of a circle, and Professor Dovey's face appeared in the middle, blinking at them from inside a crystal ball. "Girls, I have news," she said breathlessly. Immediately Hester noticed something was wrong. Dovey's eyes were rimmed red, her hair frazzled and greasy, and the lines around her mouth rutted deep. Her office was a mess, littered with newspapers and scrolls. The gold vial that Dovey had recently been wearing around her neck was now empty, and there was a map floating in the air like a wandering balloon, covered in red lettering Hester couldn't make out. There was even a food stain on the dean's green gown, which made Hester think the situation was dire indeed, since no one had ever seen Professor Dovey look anything but spotless.
Are you okay, Professor?
Hester asked, struggling to muster sympathy, an emotion she didn't really have. Though she had zero respect for fairy godmothers, and Dovey had been Cinderella's before becoming Good's Dean, the fact Dovey trusted them with this mission had softened Hester's opinion of her. She'd even begun to see Clarissa Dovey as a friend.
You look a little,
Girls, your quest is over for now, Professor Dovey declared. I need you to return to school. The witches gasped. You can't do that, Dot started.
After all, we've...
Annadil overlapped. Hester cut them off.
Professor, I know we haven't brought you a short list of candidates, but we're working like dogs to find someone we believe in, and trust me when I say we're all deeply grateful for this responsibility.
Hester, said Professor Dovey.
You can trust us to finish the job. Please don't punish us by taking our quest away, not when we're finally starting to figure out... Hester!
Professor Dovey snapped.
This is not about punishing you. On the contrary, I have complete faith in your abilities. That's why I need your help on an urgent matter. A matter that supersedes all else.
Hester stared at her.
But what can be more urgent than finding a new schoolmaster?
Behind Dovey, the door to her office swung open, and Professor Emma Anemone peeked beneath the floating map, slathered in a green beauty mask.
Clarissa, do you mind if I attend Dean Sophie's dance this evening? Given how many of our students are going, and with Princess Uma still on leave, surely someone from Good should be...
Not now, Emma!
The Dean barked. Professor Anemone fled.
Professor Dovey,
Hester started. I don't have time for questions, Hester. I need you to return to the castle at once. The peony line on the flower ground is up and running from Eternal Springs and can get you back by nightfall.
Of course. Anything to help?
Hester said feebly, still upset their quest would be cut short.
But can I at least ask, is this about Sophie?
And ever, boys, said Dot.
Oh, shut it, Dot!
Hester ripped. Girls, our troubles are far bigger than the antics of a fellow dean, Professor Dovey said, glancing up anxiously at the magic map. But I will say this. She leaned in, glaring hard into the crystal ball. I'm hoping you can take care of 2 birds with 1 stone.